Welcome back to Wrestling Roundtable Radio. Took the week off last week, had family problems, but also I'm pretty swamped with work, and that's why I want to announce right at the beginning of the show that Wrestling Roundtable Radio is going to have a new format, not every Tuesday, but now every other Tuesday. It's going to give me a little more time to work on some projects because, as you know, aside from everything Wrestling Roundtable, the website, the video files, the audio show, also doing Pro Wrestling Respect. Got a lot of events coming up, not just the video content on YouTube. We got June 6th coming up in the Burlington National Guard Armory. Pro Wrestling Respect 3 tickets are available at WrestlingRoundtable.com in the store. While you're shopping, please visit our Amazon store. If you're going to get any WWE, TNA, UFC, DVD, CD, any piece of apparel, book, action figure, whatever it is, please shop through our store so we can get a cut of it too. You can also support the show by going to WrestlingRoundtable.com store, like I mentioned, and getting the Wrestling Roundtable t-shirt. Spread the word about Wrestling Roundtable. And in addition to Pro Wrestling Respect and Wrestling Roundtable, also have the Wrestling Road Diaries documentary that I'd like to get some more work in on. A lot of people ask about the documentary. Everyone saw the trailer on YouTube, and everyone seems to be interested. It's coming along great so far, I think. Just need some more time to work on it. So cutting back to bi-weekly will not only give us more time to talk about a lot of other different topics, cumulative in the couple weeks that will pass, but also give me more time, at least in the immediate future, to work on these projects because I'm pretty swamped. I've been up since 2 in the morning, got a couple winks in here and there, but also going to be shooting a bunch of shows coming up, and this show is just getting started. But before we do get started on the talk, I mentioned WrestlingRoundtable.com before, of course, updated the news for this week, and also wanted to let you know that the SmackDown recap by Zach Fellows is up, soon to be followed by the Raw recap by Bill Treadway, guest columns, and more. So go check that out on WrestlingRoundtable.com right now. First up, we want to talk about mixed martial arts, and for that I'm going to be bringing on Rodney LeConte, director of the Grappling King's upcoming documentary. You can find out more about him and his films at RodneyLeConteFilms.com. First thing we want to talk about is Strikeforce St. Louis, which happened the other weekend. Strikeforce, of course, the potent, I didn't know it, second biggest mixed martial arts company in North America, possibly the world, and I want to see them do well. However, the main event really left a bad taste in my mouth before it happened and after it happened. However, first, let's talk about the Roger, however you pronounce these Brazilian names, never can figure it out. Roger Gracie defeating former UFC heavyweight champion Kevin Randleman with a rear naked choke in the second round, upping his record to 3-0. He's undefeated with 3 wins, but it was several years in between his last couple fights. However, I think it was nice to see a Gracie win for a change, and especially win on the ground with the jiu-jitsu, which they're known for. Haven't heard too much of Kevin Randleman recently. What'd you think of the fight, Rod?
Kevin Randleman really needed this fight, and honestly, I would have been surprised if he actually won because he's one of those great wrestlers that really hasn't transitioned well into his full potential in mixed martial arts, I feel like. He still has that strong wrestling base, and I think he relies on that too much. He was really smart enough in this fight to not immediately go for takedowns. He shot a few times, but then held back. I think, he was very smart about it. His best thing would have been standing on the feet, using his power strikes, because he's very experienced, a lot more experienced than Gracie. But Gracie has years and years of jiu-jitsu experience. I mean, this is a guy who makes most of his money off his grappling skills, so he doesn't even need, mixed martial arts. But this guy, had reach advantage, height advantage, and then once he got on the ground, he mastered Randleman, and Randleman did a good job of, fighting off the rear naked choke for a while, but you just knew that the end was near to come.
Randleman's been around the block, a veteran, been around for a while, and unlike, let's say, someone else who's been around for a while, Mark Coleman, or even maybe Randy Couture, he seemed a a little more spry, wouldn't you say?
You never know with Randleman, but to me, he had to really have. When was the last time he had a really a big win that has done something for his career? I mean, this guy, decorated athlete, but with the record of 17 and 15, what else can you expect from him? You know, this guy's 36. He's not getting any younger. He's still in great shape. But as far as mixed martial arts career, I mean, I really still want him to turn into a Ken Shamrock, you know?
Well, there was a really good article on SureDog, someone wrote up in a blog, about these fighters that are getting up in years, or maybe even just up in fights, such as Chuck Liddell and Sakuraba, who just continued to fight really past the point where they should be allowed. And the point was that we're finding out a lot more now about post-concussion syndrome and the brain damage thanks to Chris Nowinski's Brain Institute and their studies in the post-Benoit incident sort of time frame, and we're finding out a lot about what this sort of impact nonstop does to different sort of athletes, whether it's professional wrestlers, NFL players, and soon probably to be mixed martial artists. And they did make the great point in there that people like Chuck Liddell are starting to sound a lot like Joe Frazier and a lot of the old-time boxers who need translations at the bottom of the screen when they talk. Chuck Liddell's starting to sound like that. So obviously Kevin Randleman may not have the greatest record and doesn't seem to be in that sort of bad shape, but it just kind of goes to show that it gets to the point with some of these fighters where they might want to consider doing something else, whether it was coaching, opening a gym, something like that to at least save their brain cells.
I don't think someone like Chuck Liddell would ever get in the level of a Frazier. I mean, these guys...
You sure? He sounds like he's well on his way.
I don't think so. I think that's just the way he normally is. I mean, fighters like him and Vanderlei, they've taken their shots. When you're training in the gym every day and you get hit in the head, it's going to take its toll. But the thing with mixed martial arts is that you're not only getting hits to the head, you know, there's submissions, there's grappling, and I think it's a lot safer when it comes to saving the fighters than boxing. Boxing, it's constant hit in the head, constant movement. I mean, they're getting up there in age, but I don't think it's going to get to a point where mixed martial arts, unless, you know, they keep getting knocked out after knocked out after knocked out, then, you know, then it might take its toll. But I don't think it'll ever take its toll as much as a beat-up boxer would.
Pound for pound, certainly not, but the potential is there because definitely, like you said, there's many more options in mixed martial arts, taking it to the ground, for instance, and making it not so much a stand-up contest or a kickboxing contest where you're probably going to be landing a lot more shots like that. But the possibility is always there. And speaking of keeping it on stand-up, the heavyweight fights continued as Antonio Bigfoot Silva took on Andrei Arlovski and defeated him by decision. I read some opinions that this fight was really terrible. I didn't think it was that bad. It stayed mainly as a boxing fight, I would say. But I think Arlovski looked a little better than getting knocked out of the air by Fedor or as he's looked the last few fights. And I was also struck by how big he was compared to Bigfoot Silva. They were pretty much the same. Thoughts on the fight, Rod?
Andrei Arlovski, for a guy who once was probably at one time considered the number one heavyweight in the world, the look in his eyes, you really could tell it's not the same. You look at when he was UFC champion back like UFC in the 50s, like 03 era, and when he came to the ring, he just had a certain swagger to him, a certain confidence. But when they showed him backstage right before this fight, he almost had a worried look. He's almost fighting scared, like he doesn't want to lose. And it's just not that same fire. I don't know what he has to do. I know he started training with Greg Jackson. I don't know if he's still training with Freddie Roach. But I think this guy really just needs to get back on his roots. He was... Basically, the second round was the closest that it was this fight. Silva beat him at his own game, and I was really impressed because, Antonio Silva came. This is the biggest win in his career, and this is something that Andrei Arlovski needed, and he just didn't deliver on all points.
Well, I thought after the suicide watch he was on earlier in the year, he looked a little more healthier, let's say. He didn't look like someone who was on the verge of breaking down. I thought he put up an okay fight. Maybe it wasn't the greatest fight, fine. But moving on to the main event, let's bring on Chris Harris. Hello, Chris.
Hey, yo.
Hey, yo, Chris.
Hey, Chris.
This is where Strikeforce really put up something I did not agree with. And I want to like Strikeforce. I want another MMA promotion to come up and succeed. Competition is good, and they've got a lot of good fighters on their roster and a lot of options that UFC doesn't have. Much like how we always say week after week, TNA should have been promoting all along the fact that they've got things, divisions, matches, people, less restrictions, whatever it might be, that WWE doesn't or can't do. In TNA's case, they could emphasize great tag team wrestling, cruiserweight style wrestling, women actually wrestling instead of fucking up moves every time they get tagged in. Things like younger guys, things like that. In that same vein, Strikeforce has those options that UFC doesn't have. There's a lot of good fighters that they also employ, but also have the women's division. They co-promote. They've got a lot of different things that they could be doing, and not to mention CBS. But this supremely pissed me the fuck off because they bring in Alistair Overeem, who is their heavyweight champion, primarily fighting in Japan because he can get away with using steroids there.
So he says. Horse meat, so he says.
Horse meat, sure. Horse shit, it's more like it. But they put him up against Bret Rogers. Now, obviously, the last fight Bret Rogers had was against the real top heavyweight in the world, Fedor Emelianenko, who knocked Bret Rogers the fuck out in the second round of their fight last year. This is what boggles my mind. How is it that Bret Rogers loses, and not only loses so decisively to Fedor Emelianenko, but he gets the title shot? Now, I know a lot of people are probably going to say it's M1 and screwing around the negotiations with the contract and this and that. I mean, even now, Scott Coker said that it's not guaranteed that if Fedor gets past Verdum, that Fedor will challenge Overeem for the belt. And a lot of people have read into that it means M1's going to fuck up the negotiations again. But really, to give Bret Rogers, coming off a loss, a bad loss, a title shot like that, I was supremely pissed off, especially in light of the show we just did talking about how great UFC's heavyweight division is. What the fuck's going on with this heavyweight division? And Bigfoot Silva may be an okay fighter, but we all know what he was doing in Japan the other year because he got suspended for using steroids here in America. He went over to Japan where they have less restrictions, let's say, which is probably why guys like Coleman, Shamrock, and Overeem are over there in the first place throughout their careers. Now, that's not to say that Overeem, and no one failed a drug test this time around, Overeem didn't look like he was juicing at the moment. He certainly looked a lot less cut and big as he did in Japan recently. But Bret Rogers, once again, got knocked out, this time in the first round by Overeem, who did look very dominating, very scary, but still, this fight just pissed me the fuck off because of the circumstances. Do you guys feel the same, Rod?
Not necessarily, because who else would you put in that position? If things are going, I guess, a little wacky with Fedor, I don't know who else you'd put there. There's already been smack talking with Overeem and Rogers, or Rogers has called them out numerous times, and I think if all the other heavyweights, their heavyweights is not nearly as deep as the UFC heavyweight division, so they're very limited in their choices. So I mean, why not have this match as almost like a grudge match as a way to introduce Overeem to the fans and have these two guys go at it. Rogers, even though yes he did win, did get knocked out, but he did put up a good fight up against Fedor. He did show that he can. He does have a lot of offensive skills with such little experience. But in this fight, it just showed. I wouldn't say Rogers got beat. I would say he got abused. This was borderline child abuse. He did not get one shot in, and it really just showed that Rogers definitely needs some work, and he's not ready to be in there with the elite heavyweights.
Maybe not. He may have shown some signs of life in the Fedor fight in the first round, but I just think the idea that this guy would lose and get the challenge for the world title does damage to the world title, the promotion. Your thoughts, Chris?
I agree with you, but I also like to bring up another point. Why the hell is Overeem still the champion anyway? Guy's been gone for like 2 years. Why are we introducing him to the fans now? That doesn't make any sense to me also.
Well, I guess that goes along with the co-promoting that Strikeforce does. We've seen them send over fighters to Japan to fight for Dream and back and forth and work with M1 with Fedor. So, in a sense, they're a little more worldwide than just the U.S., but it does also, like you said, seem somewhat strange to have a heavyweight champion for so long, and here he is, and he's going to fight the guy that just lost last time.
Mm-hmm. Look at UFC. Brock got hurt. He was hurt. In November, and the UFC panics and puts an interim champion in. Overeem has been gone for like 2 years.
Well, I still think that interim championship was a little premature, and I think that's kind of showing with the fact that Lesnar's fighting again so soon because they've had champions not fight for not as long as Overeem, but a considerable amount of time, like Silva. But moving on to this weekend, coming up, Rashad Evans taking on Quinton Rampage Jackson in a long-anticipated fight. Mr. T fighting Rashad, or B.A. Baracus, excuse me. Although I do fully expect WWE to be bringing in Mr. T to have a segment with Quinton Jackson when he hosts Raw in a couple weeks, which is just a mind-fuck in and of itself. I can't believe that a UFC fighter who's under contract to UFC at the moment is going to be hosting Raw, even if it's with a bunch of nobodies.
Well, a couple of times Tito Ortiz went to TNA.
Yeah, but that's TNA. Who cares? Rashad and Quinton Jackson. I'd love to hear your predictions, gentlemen. Chris?
I'm going with Rampage. Rampage is my favorite fighter, so I can't root against him. I don't know whether or not I could care less at this point. I just want to see this fight so badly. Ultimate Fighter last season was great, and it's been just, we've been sitting here with blue balls for 6 months waiting for this.
Well, I like both fighters. I like Quinton Jackson, and I like Rampage, and this may be inaccurate, but I thought Rashad Evans built his streak before losing to Lyoto Machida with his great boxing skills, I thought. And I think the time away and the fact that Quinton Jackson doesn't seem to be so much focused on fighting anymore, he made it plainly clear he'd rather be doing movies if he doesn't get his way, I guess. And I just could see a knockout in some form. It certainly could happen from Jackson, but I'm going to go with Rashad. What do you think, Rod?
I could agree with you on definitely a lot of those points, Eric. It has been since last March, since Rampage just fought in not close decision, but I guess it was a pretty fair fight with Keith Jardine, Rashad's training. And Rashad I think he's a better athlete, but I don't know if he has what it takes to finish Rampage, but I think he has what it takes to win by points. I'm still going to go with Rampage, but every time I count Rashad out, I know that he's somehow going to end up with a victory. I just hope that Rampage, he has the wrestling to neutralize Rashad. I just hope that he's been learning how to check his leg kicks, because that's been part of his weakness too in the past. Forrest really picked him apart with that. And, it depends which Rampage shows up, really. If a really focused 100% Rampage comes in, like the Rampage that fought Vanderlei Silva, the Rampage that came in and beat Dan Henderson, I think Rampage is going to come out the winner, and he's not going to let it go to decision.
I mentioned Chuck Liddell earlier, and just mentioning the Rashad Quinton light heavyweight fight coming up on Saturday, I do want to jump ahead a little bit, because as I mentioned with Chuck Liddell, he is going to be fighting in Canada against Rich Franklin. I don't know about you two, but this doesn't really ring to me as true as these not only upcoming fights, but the fights afterwards, not just the versus fight, which is going to have Johnny Bones Jones and Vladimir Matsushchenko in August, which I cannot fucking wait for, but Junior Dos Santos and Roy Nelson, holy shit, and Anderson Silva's next title defense against Charles Shonen. I still don't know how to pronounce his name. But this Liddell-Franklin fight, if it was the originally scheduled Ortiz fight, which is kind of in that Couture-Coleman sort of vein, where it's two guys who are obviously past their prime and really can't, I don't think, accomplish too much more in their respective divisions, at least in light of the younger talent that are in there right now. Obviously, the whole season of Ultimate Fighter so far has been built on next week. What's going to happen with Ortiz? It might be this week. We know something happens. We don't know what it is exactly, but it's going to happen next week. And, of course, that happens every week. Kind of like how the previous season was, Kimbo might fight next week. It might be next week. Kimbo might fight. And we're not going to get that Liddell-Ortiz match now. And Franklin-Liddell, at least there was some interest in Coleman Couture because we didn't get to see it 13 years ago, and can they pull it off? But Franklin Liddell, I'm not feeling. What about you, Rod?
I don't know what it is about Rich Franklin. There's something about the guy that rubs me the wrong way, where I don't think I'd cheer for him in that one fight. I don't know. It's almost like, I wouldn't say like a nostalgia type fight, but I guess a fight that would have been great maybe, I don't know, like 4 years ago. Mm-hmm. It would have been a great fight. I mean, both were former champions. Both were pretty much the dominant champions in their respective weight classes. So I guess this is a chance for them to blow off this fight as before these guys get too old. I mean, I don't think the purpose of this fight is for title contention, but these guys are still training, they're still in shape, and they still want to fight. So instead of putting them against a younger, faster guy who's up on the rise, I guess someone more on their level.
Absolutely, and that's probably exactly what it is. However, if you're going to be matching up two guys like that, these two guys, I don't really get it. Chris, what do you think?
I definitely agree with Rod about there's something about Rich Franklin. I can't pinpoint it either. There's something about him I just don't like.
Let me guess. He looks like jacked up Jim Carrey.
You have the Ace and the Iceman. This sounds like some kind of horrible Top Gun fight here. I couldn't care less about this fight. Liddell has done nothing in the last few years. It's really just, hey, he's going to leave if we don't give him another fight. He doesn't want to retire. He's clearly due for retirement at this point. Mm-hmm. It's just a sad fight to me.
Well, speaking of old, sad, washed-up fighters who should be retired, we're going to move on to Bret Hart winning the U.S. title. But before we do that, want to bring on the two Wills, Will Vafidez and Will from New Jersey. Hello, Vafidez.
Yo, what's up, everybody? TLD Will's back, and I didn't even get to say any of my 2 cents on the UFC fights. Thank you very much, Eric.
All right, well, the floor is yours. Go ahead.
All right, bottom line is Rashad's going to win, and I don't care about the other fight.
Well, that was worth it.
I agree that Rashad's going to win because he is the better athlete, like what Rodney was saying, and I think he kind of wants it more, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. But that's just my opinion. But actually, and I understand what you guys are saying about Rich Franklin. I love Rich Franklin, but at the same time, all he does now is like specialty fights. He fought at catchweights, and he hasn't been involved in title races in forever now. Like it's been 2 years since he's had a match towards the title. So that might be why you guys don't like him. He hasn't fought for anything in a long time, and this fight's no exception.
Well, in wrestling terms, he would be a jobber to the stars. He's not quite a tomato can, but he is sort of a name that can obviously be fed to somebody, I think, at this point. Obviously, once Anderson Silva came in and stole his thunder, and he's never been quite the same since, and then losing to Vitor Belfort in the fall really solidified that. So, moving on to Bret Hart. We want to talk about him winning the U.S. Championship the other week from The Miz in a no disqualification match. Jason Aletto from our panel wrote a really good column about this occurrence on our website, and he made a good point that by defeating The Miz, this does attach The Miz to a big history. It does give him the rub. I do agree with that. That just having him be involved in that and be involved in now a historic moment for Bret Hart that, especially for this new generation, will be remembered, that does do something for The Miz. However, the opposite side of the coin is what I've been reading a lot from a lot of different people, is that they were pissed that The Miz lost and Bret Hart winning is a joke. And I know myself, watching this segment, I get so nervous in a Lloyd's of London way for Bret Hart, because any time that, let's say, Tyson Kidd does a springboard dropkick, he lands this close to Bret Hart's head, and I'm like, oh, he's so close to becoming a vegetable. So I just get a little nervous for Bret Hart's health in that respect. What are your thoughts on this 1 week long title switch, Rod? Was it worth it?
No. First, when I heard about the match, I just had to tune in just to see what would happen. And the fact that they actually did a title change was almost ridiculous and heartwarming at the same time, because...
Heartwarming.
Get it?
I bet you were laughing your ass off when he tripped on the ropes.
Oh, God, that was embarrassing. When Natalya had to hold him up, I was like, oh, man, this took away from the whole title match.
Yeah, usually it's Bret Hart holding up the Neidhart. Oh!
Hey! So, I don't know, just the fact that Bret Hart had to win the title with, all this help. At this point, I guess it really doesn't mean anything. At the time, I'm thinking, why would they do this? And I'm like, oh, shit, that means he's got to lose to someone. But he gave it up, so any goofy thing could happen.
This is Bret Hart bias, but much like Lou Reed, he might be old, he might be washed up, and you might not care for his work, but Bret's still cool. But this match was a disaster, if you can even call it a match.
Anytime he says the WWE Universe, he loses a lot cool factor, in my opinion.
Yeah. It was kind of cringeworthy to watch it. It's just like, ugh, I can't believe they went through with this, and then they vacated the title. What was the point? Why couldn't they just have Ron Killings beat Miz for the title if they're going to give him the belt?
I'm actually going to defend WWE here, at least maybe in a devil's advocate sort of way, but you guys are saying, what's the point? The point is to have a nice moment on Raw in Canada.
Am
I wrong?
No, you're right. And I have to disagree with Chris and Rodney both because they don't know what they're talking about. Bret Hart winning the U.S. title made the U.S. title relevant again. And that's what Jay wrote in his column, because me and him talked about that for a while. The point is to make the United States title relevant because it hasn't been relevant since The Miz had it. What made The Miz having the U.S. title so important? The only reason why it was important was because he was holding another belt. That was the only reason why. Focus was on the tag belts, not the U.S. title. So now, Bret Hart winning the belt, all of a sudden the spotlight went up saying, oh, whoa, the U.S. title got changed. So now people are paying attention to it, and then on top of that, now you have a new guy win the belt, and now it makes the belt relevant again. That's the whole point of it. It wasn't about Bret, about the match. It wasn't about that. It was just about getting the U.S. title out in the open. And that, to me, is the reason why this all happened, because it made it relevant that Bret Hart won the belt.
First of all, Rodney and Chris are on the show because they know what they're talking about, and they wouldn't be if they weren't. Secondly, wasn't the U.S. title relevant because of The Miz in the first place? Because he was doing so well with his act, because he was so over? Wasn't it already over in the first place? And wasn't it more, as opposed to making the U.S. title important, giving Bret Hart that moment? Like, who's to say it's going to be important in a couple more weeks?
It can be if they do it correctly, though. What I'm getting at is that he was focused on defending the tag titles only. He was just kind of floating around with the other belts.
Really? They did 3 months in a row where he was fighting with MVP on pay-per-view for the belt.
When was the last time he fought MVP for the belt?
Well, it was earlier this year.
It was like January.
Oh, and I know that's an eternity.
So that's what I'm saying. He did not defend the belt that often. People were wondering, when is he going to defend that belt? Well, he finally does it against a legend.
I think it would have been a much bigger deal had they let Danielson win the belt. That's my opinion. This whole burying him on NXT, which I know you guys are going to get to later, but I really think that they should have let Danielson have his first win, go over The Miz, and take the belt. I think that would have been a bigger deal.
Well, at some point, that was the idea, and I guess they changed their mind. But who knows what the fuck they're doing with Bryan Danielson. It seems they change their mind weekly. But I want to get Will's, not Vafita's, opinion on this.
Me personally, I love Bret Hart. So, but again, I think it was stupid giving him the belt. It made no sense. It didn't add anything to anything. I hear what you guys are saying. It put emphasis on the belt, but if you need a 50-something-year-old guy who can't wrestle anymore, can't take a punch to the head, to put emphasis on something, you're not doing your damn jobs.
I thought it was kind of odd for The Miz to come out and say, I know that you're going to have the Hart Dynasty jump me, so I brought out William Regal and Kozlov, and then they came out through the crowd pretty much making him completely right. Maybe it's a stupid little detail that no one thought of but me, but I thought it would have been a little better if they came out from the back to make it seem like they weren't actually planning on doing that. But maybe they were in the crowd because they knew. But if they just thought these fucking things through, they wouldn't have me overthink things. So,
But I got to touch on what you guys talking about Bryan Danielson. And actually, I know everybody's, now that I see the whole grand scheme of what they're actually trying to do, I actually kind of like it, how they took him and how they took him as a guy who couldn't make it in the WWE as Bryan Danielson. So they made him change it. So he changed his style to be Daniel Bryan. I don't know how much of a change that really is, but like they made him dumb down his style or whatever. And then he tried doing it their way, couldn't make it, and then now he's all pissed off, saying, "Well, fuck you. I'm going to do it my way because you guys didn't like me. I'm going to do what I'm going to do." And I actually kind of like that character, to be honest with you. It's something different. Here's a guy who couldn't make it. They're doing it their way, so he's going to do it his way, and he's going to make it on his own. Like, I kind of like it a little bit. Now, of it. At first I thought it was stupid.
Well, I don't know who determined that Bryan Danielson couldn't make it, and I pretty much disagree with everything you said. But before we get to Bryan Danielson later on, I want to bring on Ronnie. Ronnie, hello.
Hello?
Hello. You missed your fucking turn. Anyway, let's move on to Over the Limit. Over the Limit was this past Sunday, and kind of the 11th anniversary of Owen Hart's death at Over the Edge. Hart family doing a little better now. But thoughts on the show, Will?
It was good, but it wasn't, I guess. There were good matches. Like the match I got to say is CM Punk Rey Mysterio. That got me really involved in finding out who was going to win that match. So
it was good, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm.
Well, here's what the wasn't part is not that match. I'm talking about some of the other matches. Like the tag match, I liked it, but I don't think anybody cared. Which, if you could listen to the crowd, no one really liked it, I guess, or they weren't into it. There were some good matches on the card. The last match, I thought it'd be better, honestly. So
the Cena Batista match?
Yeah, exactly. I thought the world title match was very short. Could have been longer, but then again, it's a DQ finish because, and then of course you have Orton who was pounding the mat and separated his shoulder. So, yeah, so he got a little too intense there, folks. So again, there were good moments of the pay-per-view. CM Punk getting shade, but there was a lot of thing with the blood. I don't know if a lot of people noticed. Every time someone was bleeding, you saw a medic out there with a towel.
Right. Well, the whole point is there can be no blood. We can't give anybody anything. Everything has to be strictly 100% PG because Linda McMahon just this past week got the Republican Party nomination for the U.S. Senate seat in Connecticut, and the scariest news I've heard in a long time. Brett.
I actually loved the last match. I mean, I don't know how PG it is with vehicular manslaughter trying to run over John Cena, but, them two fighting it out. I think Batista put on a pretty good show for his last match. He, went balls to the walls, took a nice little hit at the end there. I like the emotion that both guys put into the match.
406 area code, you're on with Wrestling Roundtable. Name and location, please. Any day now. All right, forget you. All right. 856 area code, you're on with Wrestling Roundtable. Name and location. What is going on with calls this week? 856, hello? Fuck this. Moving on to Raw the next day, Bret Hart was named the new GM of Raw, giving up the U.S. Championship, which was won by R-Truth. Our message board over at WrestlingRoundtable.com seems to be rejoicing because there's so many black champions. Kofi Kingston won the Intercontinental on Sunday, and the next day, the second secondary title won by R-Truth. Both guys I like, both black, so that's pretty cool.
And it's not even February.
John Lovett's hosting Raw, and Batista quits. Thoughts on Raw, Brett?
Lovett, I thought, was going to be a lot funnier. He kind of disappointed in me. Batista,
you know what he should have done is just come out at the beginning and say it stinks and leaves.
Basically.
I thought, no, but Batista, man, it's a shame they're losing him at this rate. What a terrific heel he has played the last 5 months. It is one of the best heel gimmicks, and not many people would have said this like a year ago about him, but the spotlight gimmick, the wheelchair was excellent. He was getting so pissed off. It was just like such a great way to go out. I thought
it was great last night.
It gives him room to come back, too. It doesn't really – it gives him, you know, he can come back at any time now because he could use this as a way to get back. So I thought that was good about the show. I think the show was good. New U.S. champion, you know, R-Truth. Now we know why he won. I was wondering why DiBiase didn't win on Over the Limit. Now we know why, because R-Truth is winning the belt. So that made sense now, because it didn't make sense on the pay-per-view, but it made sense now. The John Lovett segment, the only thing I liked best was the pinch to Virgil, and that knocked him out. So that was pretty funny, actually. But
I got a question, though.
Yeah.
Why do they keep calling him the real Virgil, like there's an impersonator walking around somewhere? Ladies and gentlemen, this is the real Virgil. This is the real one.
It's kind of like the Ultimate Warrior, how there were 7 of them and they all died of steroids. Same for Virgil, right?
There's 8 Virgils?
Well, Batista, as Will brought up, was pretty much on a roll with this new heel character that he started doing the past several months this year. And in a way, yeah, it's bad for them to lose him at his most interesting point from a character standpoint. And kind of the opposite is Orton. Orton was getting so over these past several months, and it's almost like they're rectifying his terrible heel turn from 2004 by doing it the right way this time and not completely changing around his character. And people were really getting into him. Just last week, he was behind John Cena as the top-selling merchandise seller at WWE.com. And no one's done that or come close, really, outside of maybe Shawn Michaels since Jeff Hardy. Randy Orton was selling a lot of merchandise. He's obviously getting a big reaction. He's becoming a big star again. And then he goes and hurts himself. Not on purpose, at least, but couldn't have come at a worse time. And I did read some ideas on the internet that I did like. One person said that they should bring back the RNN updates.
Yeah, there you go. One of the guys, Heyo Chico, on our message board on actually on blogtalkradio.com asked if anybody thinks that Randy Orton will be out of action due to his injury. I mean, personally, I don't think he will, just because he's still in the storyline.
The reason they're doing that is because they don't know yet. And it seemed like last night when they mentioned, Batista, you're going to have to wrestle Randy Orton, they obviously knew it wasn't going to happen, so it was kind of a safe route. But it's still to be determined. And knowing Randy Orton, he probably will. It's unfortunate, at least for their from the company standpoint, but it's still a possibility. Do you think he's going to be out at any point, Brett?
It's just like what you said. It doesn't look like they know or whatever, but why would you put him in the main event in the pay-per-view? And it's really not that far away if you don't at least have a hope that he's going to be there. It probably looks like he's going to take a week, maybe 2 off, relax himself, and he'll be all right.
Well, they could always get a way out. He could always be attacked, much like Edge attacked Kennedy for the briefcase and all that sort of shit. There's always a way out. But the other thing to consider also is with the Fatal 4-Way format, it's not as much workload as one-on-one.
Right.
Let's bring up another call if this will fucking work this time. 574 area code. You're on with Wrestling Roundtable. Name and location.
Hi, I'm Nicholas Walborn, and I'm from Indiana. The Randy Orton and Batista thing, it's just a way for Batista to show how he lost and how he's not going to get another chance. Also, Randy Orton they need to find out as soon as possible if he's able to wrestle at the pay-per-view. If they don't, they need to find a top-notch wrestler to take his place.
Who would you suggest they take his place?
There's Chris Jericho, but if I was WWE, they should at least try.
In my mind,
The Miz is a good chance.
The Miz?
Morrison is a great wrestler, but they need to start pushing some of these wrestlers. And if Randy Orton can't wrestle, this is a good chance they could push some of these wrestlers.
The problem with John Morrison, though, is he's in a similar situation like Randy Orton, where he's been having an ankle injury for the past couple weeks, and it looks like it's getting pretty bad. No one knows, per se, if it's going to put him out, I think, just yet, but that's just for John Morrison. Miz is a good option, too, because he seems to be, you would think, out of the U.S. title picture, at least maybe, after losing to R-Truth, because he figured that was his belt to win back. But the thing to keep in mind with these injuries, too, is just because someone's injured, that doesn't necessarily mean they have to be out of the loop. Not just because of the RNN updates I mentioned earlier, but let's also keep in mind that that's how WWF built their Attitude Era and the success from there, because of Stone Cold Steve Austin with a broken neck. He was still on Raw every week, even though he was injured. He was still in storylines, getting his character built up, not just for the comeback, but in general. So there's definitely ways, if they're creative, to keep someone in the loop. And we're going to bring 201 area code into the loop. Name and location, please.
Yeah, this is Don from New Jersey.
Hey, Don, what's up? Question or comment, please?
Yeah, I got a comment. I think they kind of blew their wad on the whole U.S. title going to R-Truth right away. I mean, they had an opportunity to either do a tournament or maybe just drag it out for a little while with some, DQ, things like that. And even a Fatal 4-Way, they could have had, their top 4 mid-card guys go for it. And they just basically just said, let's just put it on Truth and then put 3 random guys at Fatal 4-Way. So I just wanted to say, And I was also the guy who said the RNN thing should come back. I just mentioned that as a joke on the website, but you never know.
Good.
They might actually care this time. Last time they didn't even give a damn.
Well, that's a very good point, and it also goes to show how WWE is run, because at least as far as Raw goes. Now, we got some shit on YouTube because one of our longtime listeners said, you guys only talk about Raw. There's more to WWE's universe and brand and all that shit than just Raw. Well, yeah, obviously, and we will be talking about NXT next, finally, after people have been asking about that for a long time, and I can't wait to talk about it myself, but let's also be real. SmackDown is pretty much the hands-off show. They let Michael Hayes and their writers pretty much do what they want, not completely unchecked, of course, but they give them a little more leeway. That's why it's kind of known as the wrestling show and has more of the younger flavor, whereas Raw is the one that gets the fucking 3-hour specials, the commercial-free Raws, the guest GMs. Everything big happens on Raw, and it's pretty obvious, I would think, if you watch it. But as I was saying earlier, it goes to show how on-the-fly things are. They don't necessarily think through a lot of these things, and I think this U.S. title vacancy and win within the same night by R-Truth really, like Don said, goes to show how they don't think things through, especially in long term, not even long term, short term, with the Fatal fucking 4-Way pay-per-view coming up. You'd think they could at least stretch it out to then. They could even make it a tri-brand-wide tournament where they determine out of several tournaments even, maybe one per show, of each participant coming in and qualifying for a Fatal 4-Way match in a couple weeks or whatever it might be.
One thing they could have done with that is have the NXT winner maybe get the shot against the Miz, I guess, or something like that. That could have been one thing. The only reason why I think they did it quickly was because, Bret Hart was announced as the GM. I think a tournament would have been kind of weird because they just did an Intercontinental tournament over on SmackDown. So they kind of just did that. I think it was I think it was better this way because if you do a tournament, that means you got to wait 3 more weeks and wait for a U.S. champion. It could lose the flavor of when Bret Hart won the belt. By him dropping it right away and giving a new, you just build the character up now by having R-Truth win that belt. So now you have the belt now back in the picture of Raw to to be used, and it becomes a little more important again. Waiting a couple weeks out would not really, to me, I wouldn't care.
Why couldn't you just build them up by having several victories over people leading up to a title win? You'd have some build-up that way.
Well, I think that belt should be scrapped anyway. Let go of it already.
Speaking of scrap, that's what NXT might be when it's up in a couple weeks. They keep saying they want to put it on another network outside of Sci-Fi, maybe Bravo or something, but we'll see. And NXT is something that we've been asked about a lot, and we have yet to talk about, and I can't wait to talk about it, but I'm going to wait a little while longer because I'm patient, like I could wait for a U.S. title tournament, Will. So I want to hear some of your thoughts. Brett, what do you think about NXT so far?
Well, I haven't seen tonight's yet, so I can't comment on that. But I have watched every other week so far, and I enjoy it. It's something new. It's something fresh. I mean, the American Gladiator type Double Dare challenges they've had are pretty stupid and ridiculous, but I like Wade Barrett. I hate Heath Slater, which I guess is something because I have some sort of emotion for him. You know, like
happy because he was eliminated tonight.
Nice, that fucking Ginger's out of there. But I like the stuff they did with Daniel Bryan, Daniel's son, and Jacobs, whatever that kid called him last week.
I think
and
we should
Michael
just
Cole.
stick with Bryan Danielson for the sake of our sanity right now.
But you know what? It's finally giving Michael Cole a personality after, what's it been, 20 years? Mm-hmm. So maybe get something, at the very least, we get a Michael Cole that means something to somebody. But, I mean, you know, it's cool. It's better than watching ECW, I'll tell you that much.
Is it giving Michael Cole personality or giving him Vince McMahon's personality in his headset?
No comment on that one.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Double Dare challenge because someone on our message board embedded a YouTube video where someone actually added the Double Dare music to the barrel carrying challenge. And it actually, as stupid as it was, I was into it. It got me into it. And I don't think I would have been as into it without the Double Dare challenge. And I couldn't believe it. Me always talking about how stupid this non-wrestling shit is. Actually wanted to see if anybody could carry the barrel faster than anybody else. Maybe it's because I know Brian and he's a friend, but I just wanted to see it unfold, and I actually got into it. But you mentioned Heath Slater, and that promo contest, I can't tell, and this is coming from someone who's worked in wrestling for a while, I can't tell what was scripted and what wasn't. Because obviously with WWE, in large part, everything you see is planned, but from the way they were talking, I really got the feeling that these idiots were actually speaking off the cuff. And by these idiots, I mean specifically Heath Slater, because maybe I'm too hard on wrestlers here. Maybe it's because I don't have a problem with talking, but it boggles my mind. And maybe not in his case because he hasn't been around so long, but there are wrestlers that have been wrestling forever, like 10 years, and they're still young, but 10 years, let's say, and they still can't fucking talk. I don't understand it.
Bret Hart.
To me, just improv or talking just seems easy, but when they got these random topics, quote-unquote, and he started listing cereals. Okay, cereals your topic. You know, you got a lot of cereals. There's Captain Crunch. There's Lucky Charms. Blah, 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 and people started booing, rightfully so. That's not a fucking promo. That's a list. So that's something that really pisses me off in wrestling when wrestlers use lists as a way to. It's a verbal crutch, really, just to prolong what sounds like a promo. So that's one thing prospective wrestling students can learn. Don't do lists for promos. But I'm going to move it over to Will. I want to hear your thoughts, Will, on NXT.
I agree with Brett on everything he said. I mean, the one thing about... I know, I'll agree with you. Don't get comfortable, okay? But I do like the concept of the whole show. It was definitely better than ECW. It makes you want to watch it. I like the pro results. I do like them having like a ranking system. It makes it look like more important. The only problem with that is that ranking system is not going to work because once the show's over, you're going to see all 8 of them on Raw or SmackDown. You know it's going to happen. You know,
that's the problem with all WWF competitions, from the Invasion, and that wasn't a competition per se, but that would happen on Tough Enough also. They'd always bring everybody in no matter what.
Yeah, but you know,
even for the losers.
Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing, and this is how I'm going to get to where Daniel Bryan about this whole thing. To me, it looks like they're developing two characters: Michael Cole, who has never really had a character before, and then you have Daniel Bryan, who he lost all these matches, and now it's kind of getting built up to where he's kind of revealing things that you would never thought would come out of his mouth. Like that's something. You know, he was
only if you've never seen his ROH stuff.
Well, no. I'm just saying WWE. I mean, I'm talking.
Okay.
I don't care what he did in ROH. Honestly, it's about what he's doing right now. So, the bottom line is that Daniel Bryan is able to say things that not many people would be allowed to do. That's a huge thing on his shoulder. I mean, he basically said, "Go say what you want to say," and he's going to get to go say that. He's mentioning JR. He's mentioning all these things about Michael Cole. You know, this is a different character than anything else. He's able to speak his mind almost. It's like he doesn't have a script. And this would be good for a web show. I think it'd be better on the web than being on actual TV. I think it'd be like a web exclusive show. I would like that rather than actually seeing it on TV because, you know, I mean, who's going to watch it on TV? Not many people do.
Well, yeah, the ratings haven't improved, and if anything, they've gone maybe slightly down, if not stayed about the same as ECW was doing at the end. But it's funny you mention a web show, because to me it is. YouTube has ruined my wrestling viewing on television, because rather than wasting 2 hours of my life sitting through crap and hoping something good happens, if I just read something good happens, or if I'm interested in, let's say, Bryan Danielson's segment, I just YouTube it the next day. It's practically video on demand. So I'm keeping up with it there. I don't think I've ever actually watched the show on TV. Everything I've seen about it has been on the Internet. So in that sense, to me, it is a YouTube show, and I want to explain why I think this stuff they've been doing with Danielson, as you guys have mentioned, is the most brilliant stuff they've done in years. Maybe the last thing I can remember, I don't even remember. Like, I really enjoyed Cena's character and his year-long title run a few years ago, but this is the best TV they've produced in a long time, and let me explain why. With the Daniel Bryan character, even the name change has gotten under the skin of the intended audience, and the way WWE has manipulated everybody, and by everybody I mean not just even the Mark fans, but the supposed smart Mark fans on the Internet, has been absolutely fucking brilliant. Because, first of all, before it even happened, just when the Internet got word of the name change, the Internet is where Daniel Bryan's audience, Bryan Danielson's fans are. And they've all been keeping tabs on this. And I admit, the first week, it was really cool and surreal for me, having known him all these years and seen him live so many times. It was weird seeing him be able to go on TV, WWE TV, and pretty much do his act. They didn't change his outfit. They didn't change his wrestling style for very much at all. And I thought it was fantastic. The idea that WWE could take this guy and have him go on a losing streak but still get more over with the fans than anybody else, that's just fucking brilliant. And the way that they were able to make him look good in losses, when he fought Batista, that was a good short match. He looked good against Batista. In his first fucking match, they put him in there with the right guy, another Internet favorite, Jericho, made him look good against the fucking world champion at the time. Who the hell else is going to come into the company, at least as far as indies go, and look that good their first night out? For a comparison, because everyone talks about, as far as ROH guys coming in and succeeding Punk as the standard, when Punk came in ECW, pretty much the same shows, or at least the time slot a few years ago, they obviously debuted him in the market they intended, in the smart Mark Hammerstein crowd, so they knew who he was. But, yeah, he got a victory over Just Incredible, fine enough. But compare that to Bryan Danielson coming in, and not even just competing with Jericho, but putting him in submission holds, and people bought it. Those video packages they did, on the first show or first couple shows where they had the sit-down personality profiles were great. They gave some history to some of these guys. David Otunga's another guy I like. I like his look. I'm not sold on his wrestling per se. I haven't seen so much of it, but just as a character, he gets great heat. He's got a great look. He's got a great backstory. Danielson, of course, I know. And even against Khali, he got him in a guillotine choke and got him down to 2 knees. He looked pretty good, even in a loss, I would think. And he's gotten this over so much so far. And I can't believe that the internet, the idea that the internet ruined wrestling, jerk me off. That fucking myth is such bullshit. This proves it, if nothing else. Because look how easily manipulated the internet was. They were up in arms even before it started, all during it, and even now. I can't believe people actually fucking think when he got, quote, eliminated, that was the last we were going to see of him. As in, Daniel Bryan may be dead, but Bryan Danielson, well, he's got a lot to do, or whatever he said. And people think that he might actually fucking show up on Indies again, like WWE would promote that. Oh, come on. And as you guys mentioned, Michael Cole, wow, this is really good television. Letting Michael Cole either be Vince McMahon's puppet or let him, as Joey Styles has intimated, say exactly what he actually feels, has been a brilliant villain to play Bryan Danielson off of. And I really enjoyed that aspect of the show. The confrontation last week was really great. It was also another side of Bryan Danielson's character. A lot of people said in ROH he didn't have the size and the charisma and all that sort of bullshit. And I think he really disproved that last week, if nothing else. And I just think it's been absolutely great so far. The idea that the internet ruined wrestling when they've been completely worked this whole time, just played perfectly into WWE's plans. The strings were being pulled and they were reacting and didn't even know it. I mean, I couldn't even believe these people were upset that they changed his name and that was it. I mean, yeah, the name is fucking stupid, but aren't you at least happy that they had him look good against these guys? Aren't you at least happy that he's been able to look so good and get so over? Fucking Loki still isn't even on TV, and he's been signed for how long? So I think they should at least be happy about that. But I think it's just unfolding brilliantly. And any other thoughts from you, Brett?
Well, yeah, with the Bryan Danielson thing, it's like I always said, the best wrestling storylines are the ones that blur reality. I mean, as a wrestling fan, you're like, I know that's not real. I know, but man, that fucking looks pretty. Maybe that part is. Maybe that. Well, he really looks like he just smacked him. He looks pissed. Oh man, that's good entertainment when that line is blurred and you're not sure anymore.
Well, yeah, in a sense, it's the much better version of the worked shoot that Russo was going for in 2000 in WCW. The way he would do it was fucking stupid, but people really loved the stuff that, let's say, was happening in 97. You may remember when Bret Hart slapped McMahon doing the commentary and he slapped the headset off him, or the Click showing the MSG incident on the Titantron. Those sort of things that blurred the line were good. The sort of shit like Russo and Goldberg disagreeing over, quote, finish, and then Scott Steiner and Kevin Nash having to, quote, improv and this stupid word shit, I'm not going to job, that shit never worked. But when it's this sort of stuff and it blurs the line, that's the stuff that people really enjoy, like you said, Brett. Any other thoughts, Will?
I compared this to when Joey Styles did that shoot on Raw.
Yeah,
that was one of the last times I think I saw some realism in the entire product. That thing in particular brought my attention, like, whoa, Joey Styles kind of did something like that.
Well, in that sense, that's letting someone come out and say their true feelings in a sort of way.
Yeah.
And this Danielson promo last week about, I knew or I heard about the politics coming in here and how they only favor guys they've created and they only like bigger guys and blah, blah, blah. That was brilliant because that's using everything we've been saying for years, and not only we've been saying, a lot of people have been feeling in the company. And
you see they're reaching out to another audience, not the kids sitting there, because the kids probably have no idea what he's talking about.
Of
But
course
now
not.
he's
This was intended for the internet, of course.
Yeah, this is for internet, and this is for people our age. Because, see, and WWE brought us back now a little bit, just to, like, the old days where that used to happen all the time. And now it's happening, you know, small bits and pieces, and it's good entertainment. That's entertainment to me. I loved it. I think, you know, Cole slapping him tonight, I think all these things that are – Bryan Danielson is getting built up to be one of the top guys for this company. They're putting investment into his character, and this is something that's going to be great to not only keep working the angle with Cole, maybe even making Cole look like a heel now, because now he's going to look like a bad guy.
The first day.
Yeah, well, the point is, though, it makes, but now you see it. You see it now, what he's doing. He's, you know, he's calling him out, and then Cole's like demanding apologies. He's more like McMahon's puppet.
It's more overt now, the heel character.
You know, but that's good. He needs like that character. He needed that, you know, and now Cole can probably play a bad guy commentator to the King on Raw or on NXT, and he can really build that up, and it could be some good commentary too. So this is a good thing for everybody. It's good for Raw. It's good for NXT. It's good for Bryan Danielson, and it's good for the product. So absolutely. I think it's a win-win situation.
It definitely is, and I think a lot of these internet fans need to calm down because I don't think Danielson's going anywhere. I think they have a lot of good things in store for him. Maybe they changed their mind on him beating Miz for the U.S. title right now, but it could happen down the line. Just give it some time. I think they've got some big things in store for Danielson. He's off to a great start. I wrote him an email to congratulate him because this stuff has been great. I've been enjoying it, and I wish him all the success and luck in the world. And I also want to do that for the Macho Man, who got married last week. Congratulations to the Macho Man Randy Savage remarrying. Very happy to hear that. And also wanted to send out some acknowledgments to some Roundtable fans I met this past week in Philadelphia, Jerry, Frank, and Ed, and from Virginia, Jackie, Jimmy, and Shelby. Nice to meet you guys. And also wanted to remind you that Pro Wrestling Respect 3 is coming up on Sunday, June 6th. At the Burlington National Guard Armory. Tickets are still available, and you can check out everything Pro Wrestling Respect, ProWrestlingRespect.com. And join us in a couple more weeks. We're going to be back with Wrestling Roundtable Radio for the panel of Chris, Will, Rodney, and Brett. I'm the host, Eric Santamaria. Thank you, and join us next time.